if you went through menopause before 40, there's a connection to kidney stone disease that almost nobody is talking about. And it showed up across 2 massive data sets. That's the kind of finding that deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. We've also got a drug approval out of Scotland that matters for women who can't or won't do HRT, and a governor who just put menopause policy in writing. A lot happening today.
Hi there, I'm Tony Lee, and this is Hot Flasher, your daily menopause podcast that serves up fresh news, research, and wellness tips. I've built a daily news pipeline to find the latest on women's health and menopause research. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Nikki, who handles the headlines. Take it away, Nikki.
Thanks, Tony. We've got a genuinely interesting one today. Let's get into it. There's a study out in the NAMS journal, Menopause, that I want to spend some real time on because it's the kind of finding that should be getting more airtime than it is. Researchers looked at the relationship between premature menopause, that's menopause before age 40, and kidney stone disease. And they didn't just look at one data set, they pulled from 2. The UK Biobank, which is one of the largest and most well-characterised population health databases in the world, and NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey out of the US. 2 very different populations, 2 different methodological approaches, and the association showed up consistently in both. Women with premature menopause had a significantly higher risk of kidney stone disease. And across multiple analytical approaches, that association stayed robust. That's not nothing. When a finding survives different analytical tests in different cohorts, researchers pay attention to it. And, frankly, so should the rest of us. Now, why would this be? The honest answer is, they don't fully know yet. The study authors are upfront that this warrants further investigation in prospective and mechanistic studies. What they did find, though, is interesting on its own. Genetic predisposition was associated with higher hazards of kidney stone disease. And hormone therapy, which would be the obvious candidate for explaining the link, since you'd assume lower estrogen is the culprit, hormone therapy did not meaningfully modify the association. That's actually the detail that makes me read this more carefully, not less, because if you assume the whole story is early estrogen loss causes kidney stones, you'd expect HRT to blunt that risk. It didn't, at least not in a detectable way, which points towards something more complicated going on, maybe metabolic, maybe genetic, maybe both. The researchers used the phrase clinically relevant link, careful language, not overclaiming but not dismissive either. For anyone unfamiliar, kidney stones are not a minor inconvenience. They're one of the most painful things a person can experience. They have high recurrence rates, and in serious cases, they can affect kidney function. For women who experience premature menopause, whether due to surgery, chemotherapy, an autoimmune condition, or spontaneous early ovarian insufficiency, this adds another downstream health consideration that I'd guess most of their doctors have not raised with them. The early menopause conversation tends to orbit around cardiovascular risk and bone density. Those are real and important, but the list of downstream health effects associated with early menopause is longer than most clinical conversations suggest, and this study is adding to it in a credible way. The kind of evidence that's worth your doctor being aware of. The kind they'd look at on a tool like Open Evidence rather than a wellness blog. I'd want to see this followed up in prospective studies that can actually track causality rather than just association. But as a signal, it's a strong one, and it came from solid data. Scotland just approved the first non-hormonal drug specifically for menopause symptoms, and that's genuinely worth noting, not just as a policy footnote, but as a real expansion of options for a large group of women. The drug in question is fezolinetant, a neurokinin 3 receptor antagonist. It works by blocking signals in the brain's thermoregulatory system. the pathway that goes haywire during hot flashes. It's not hormonal. It doesn't touch estrogen. It targets the specific mechanism driving vasomotor symptoms rather than trying to replace what the body is no longer producing. This matters for a real and substantial population. Women who've had hormone-sensitive cancers, women with certain cardiovascular conditions, women who have tried HRT and had a bad experience, women who simply don't want hormones and have been told for years that their only non-hormonal options are antidepressants used off-label and venlafaxine, and hoping for the best. That's a lot of people who have been waiting for something that was actually designed for this purpose. Fezolinetant has already been approved in the US and by the European Medicines Agency. Scotland's approval through the Scottish Medicines Consortium adds to that regulatory picture across different health systems, which means this drug is being evaluated and cleared in multiple distinct regulatory environments, not just rubber stamped from one agency to another. I'll say clearly, non-hormonal doesn't automatically mean better, and it doesn't mean right for everyone. HRT, for women who can use it and choose it, has a strong evidence base for symptom relief and a range of other benefits. This isn't a competition, it's an expansion of the menu, and that's what should be happening. The goal is that a woman sitting across from her doctor has more than 2 or 3 actual treatment options for symptoms that can be seriously debilitating. The fact that Scotland's Independent Medicines Review Body approved this. These are the people who decide what the NHS there will fund and recommend. Is meaningful signal. It's not a rubber stamp. Washington State Governor Bob Ferguson signed an executive order this week directing state agencies to support employees experiencing perimenopause and menopause in the workplace. This is a state-level US policy action, and it's worth understanding what that means in practice. Executive orders at the state level typically direct government agencies and their policies, so this applies to state employees, not private sector workers. That's a real limitation. But it's also how these things tend to begin. The UK, Australia, and parts of Europe have been further along on menopause workplace policy, and the US has been playing catch-up. When a state government puts this in writing, creates formal direction to accommodate things like schedule flexibility, temperature in work environments, access to information, it creates a template. It sets a precedent, and it signals to private employers that this is a legitimate employment consideration, not a niche personal issue. The symptoms that affect women's ability to work during perimenopause and menopause are real and documented. Cognitive disruption, sleep deprivation, hot flashes during meetings, anxiety, fatigue. Women at the peak of their professional experience, often in their 40s and 50s, are navigating all of this with basically zero formal workplace support in most US settings. The fact that anyone is taking a pen to paper on this at the policy level is a development worth tracking. Is an executive order binding in perpetuity? No, the next governor could revoke it, but it changes what the conversation looks like. It creates accountability in state agencies in the near term, and it gives advocates a concrete example to point to when pushing for broader legislation. Washington is now one of the more concrete actors on this in the US. That's a low bar, but it's something.
Thanks for listening to Hot Flasher. We're back tomorrow with more, so don't forget to subscribe. See you tomorrow.